About 5 years ago, my now estranged daughter, ED, cheated on her boyfriend, Brad, and got together with a guy, Ken. He quickly started isolating her from family and my husband and I from her kids. Brad had moved back to his home state devastated after the breakup. I discussed red flags her. I let her know we are here for her and concerned. Her and Ken suddenly took off and moved to another state. For 5 months, my husband and I worried about her and the kids as we had n//c at all with them. One day CPS showed up at our door with the oldest child. He was obviously injured from abuse that was reported by the school. We had no idea they had moved back to the area. We agreed to take them in. The next 20 months were traumatic, complicated, emotional, and difficult for everyone. Through it we re-established a relationship with the older child's dad, Dan. Daughter failed to comply with her plan and remained with Ken. Dan worked hard to get custody of his child and he gave ED scheduled weekly phone calls. She called oldest child 2x nothing since. We agreed to permanent custody of youngest. In the process, I put aside the hurt ED caused and agreed to scheduled weekly phone calls and supervised visits in person when schedules allowed. Legally, any or no contact is at my sole discretion. Ken was not allowed to interfere //attend. ED quit calling //scheduling visits after 3 months. I reset the call schedule to 1 month. No calls. 6 months later she calls and wanted me to drop everything for a visit the following day. I couldn't because I had to go back to work. Calls stopped again. She left Ken, has a new BF. I know nothing else about her life / whereabouts. She started calling again about a year ago and I let her know that if she was consistent with her monthly scheduled calls, we would move towards weekly calls again. She called 2 months in a row, skipped a couple months, then called 2 more months in a row. Last one happened to be night before child's birthday. She asked him what he wanted for his birthday. He said a call from her. The next day, as he blew out candles, he said, "My mom is gonna call now." He had the biggest smile on his face. Call never came. He refused my offer to call her. We survived an emotional meltdown. Next month, no call, just a text after with a lame timing excuse as to why and sorry about the birthday call, she didn't feel well. Following month, I get a text that ED feels ill again, won't be calling. I am beyond frustrated at this point. I have looked past her refusal to rebuild a relationship with us, but when it comes to the kids my heart aches for them. Hey race where I might be the I responded, parents do not get sick time. We all had COVID recently, including me, and I still took care of the children. If you do not have any time for him once a month, I don't want my time wasted with your excuses. Of course, calls stopped again. Me and my girlfriend have never fought, we get along fine. We have been living together for 9 years now, and have been dating for 12 years. We have a healthy sex life, we both have decent jobs that bring in decent money. In the past we talked about marriage a lot and would often joke about what our wedding would be like. Yes, I know how stupidly lame this sounds, however we always agreed we needed to settle down first. We bought a house about a year and a half ago, and were finally able to settle down. Our work schedules normalized, we were able to remove a huge waste of time from commuting. And we were finally able to take various activities after work, e.g., dancing classes, cooking classes, etc. We were able to finally settle down. Finally we decided to take a week off and unplug on the week of 12-year anniversary. She wanted to go camping and hiking, and do the things we used to do when we were first dating. Unbeknownst to her, I secretly decided to pick the exact same area where we met to do our hiking / camping trip. 2 weeks ago, as we are leaving, she realizes where we are going and becomes ecstatic, and gushes about how romantic I am. More or less everything seems perfect. We do our hike, and we unpack, set up, and by sundown everything feels perfect. So I decided to pop the question. This is where everything kind of falls apart. I ask her, and she just says no. We literally went from I love yous to the single most awkward silence I have ever had in my life in the time span of about a minute. We sat there kind of not saying anything before she says she is tired and goes to bed. She basically proceeds to cry herself to sleep while I sat there doing nothing. I basically didn't sleep, and the next morning, she says she wants to go home. So we pack up and have a really awkward 3-hour hike back to our car. There were a few times where things kind of felt normal and we were joking around like we used to be for a bit. On the way back home, we are talking and chatting normally, but it just feels awkward. At one point we stopped for coffee and asked if she wanted to talk about what happened, and all I got was a curt no. This is followed by another extremely long silence for the rest of the drive home. We finally get home and I unpack everything while she goes off to bed. She is going to bed. Cue more crying. I tried really hard to talk to her, but she pretty much told me that she just needs time to be alone and think. The next day she tells me she is going to take some time and see her family, which is literally on the other side of the country. It has been about 2 weeks since I dropped her off at the airport. She sent me a few messages to tell me she is fine, and that she needs some more time to think. Her best friend has been asking me every other day about what is going on with her, since she hasn't really been responding at all. I know she is okay, though, due to her posting some pictures of her and her family on Instagram. But it just feels really weird. I am an absolute giant mess. I just don't quite understand what is going on. None of my friends have really offered me anything of value. I just feel if I didn't ask the question, everything would be absolutely fine, and I don't really understand what is going on. I keep wanting to grab her laptop to try and figure out anything. I am not close to her parents at all, but I trust her and want to respect her space, but I don't know when she is coming back. I even sent her a message this morning, and I know she saw the message and received it, but hasn't replied. Also, her work has called me this morning asking about where she is. Apparently she had taken an extra week off last week, but she was supposed to be in yesterday. Now everything feels like it is falling apart and I have no idea what to do. The reason why it took so long for us to get married is we both agreed we wouldn't move to the next step until we finished the following. We both finished school. For her, that wasn't until 2 years ago. We both had stable jobs. We had a place where we could agree would be good enough to take stuff to the next step. We both had decent working hours. For a long time she was doing her residency and we more or less worked opposite shifts. We did talk about marriage and kids, and both agreed it would be part of the next step after we got settled. I'm a software engineer with a full-time job and a side hustle of doing freelance coding work in my own time. I've always been the type to have a side hustle I put a lot of my free time into. I get really bored sitting idle. My freelance hourly rates are $60 an hour, and at my full-time job, my hourly pay works out to about $40 an hour. So that's how I value my time. Anyway, over Christmas vacation, I was staying at my parents' house. My cousin was also staying over with her 3 young kids from Christmas to New Year's. I'd been planning on doing some work on my freelance projects when I had free time, in the mornings when my family had no plans. I wasn't in any rush. I was already ahead of schedule on them all, but I didn't really have anything else to do. It was in a really rural area and it's like an hour drive to the nearest anything. Then my cousin and her husband asked if I could babysit all day for 3 days so they could visit some friends in the area and hang out with just adults. I said I had planned on doing freelance work at the library, and she offered to pay me to babysit. I said I could if they got close to my freelance rates. She wanted a number, and although my freelance rates are $60, I didn't feel like that was right. It was high, but I didn't want to go too low. Honestly, babysitting 3 kids would be harder for me than the routine coding work I had for my freelance project. I don't know a lot about kids and I've never babysat for long, and I had a feeling it would be stressful and difficult. So I said $35, which is below what I make hourly at work, and what is the bare minimum I'd value my time for, if that time is spent doing difficult work. And she went crazy at me, saying that's a ridiculous rate for babysitting, that I was entitled and being selfish, that I'm trying to take advantage of how she didn't have other options, etc. I said that's way below what I'd be making if I had the time to do my own work, and I'd be putting off my own work to babysit. Her husband then got mad at me, saying that I was a 24-year-old girl, that I'm damn near a child myself, that my time is not worth that much and it's childish to say that it was, and that I was a stupid girl for not knowing that babysitting costs like $15 an hour. When I grew up and have kids of my own, I will see how stupid I was being. I was kind of done with being called stupid, so I just told them I hoped they could find someone else. My mom thinks that I asked for something offensive, and my cousin and her husband obviously did too. So I recently got together with a guy from my hobby. He asked me out first and I had some doubts that we'd work together as a couple because of the age difference. He's 35 and I'm 22. So, in my apartment, since it's an old house that was originally a single-family house, there isn't much soundproofing. And the floors creak when people move. I've gotten used to the sound of the guy upstairs getting up at 4 a.m. since he starts work at 5. And the sound of the girls in the apartments to either side of mine watching telenovelas till midnight. Taking work calls all day and having friends over on weekend nights. I know when I play music or have friends over, some of the sound leaks through the walls. So I'd never get upset about hearing my neighbors because it goes both ways. So, when my boyfriend started coming over more often, he had complaints about the neighbors, which put me in an awkward place. He wanted to go speak to them or have me text them and I said no. For example, one of the early times he stayed over we went to bed around 10. He wanted me to ask my neighbor to turn down her TV. I said she didn't have it that loud and she turns it off at midnight anyway. At 4 a.m., he got very irritated with my upstairs neighbor getting up and cooking breakfast. I said that he would be done by 5 because that's when his shift starts. At 7 a.m., he was still trying to sleep in and the neighbor on the other side had some work calls that he said he couldn't sleep through. I offered him earplugs and he said he couldn't sleep with them in either. He wanted me to ask her to quiet down. He had similar comments every time he heard someone else in the building just living their life, especially if it was when he was in bed. I got frustrated with my boyfriend and told him, you can't expect to date a hot young 22-year-old and not want to deal with a 22-year-old's living situation. I don't know if you realize, but this is a normal apartment for someone my age. Hell, my neighbors are pretty great. Nobody's throwing loud parties on work nights. Nobody's having screaming fights. Nobody's having babies. The hot young part was in sarcastic air quotes because those were his words, not mine. He got irritated and asked why I was bringing age into it. And I said it's because he can't both want someone so young and also want someone with house kinda money. And he was being so out of touch with how normal people in their 20s live. He got really irritated with me bringing age into it. And even more annoyed when I'd respond to his neighbor complaints in the future with, okay, boomer. Or tell him that if he wanted me to have a rich person apartment, he could pay for it. It's not possible for me to get to his house on my own because I don't have a car and the buses don't go that far into the suburbs. So that would mean him driving 30 minutes from his house in the suburbs to pick me up, then an extra 30 to drive me to his house. Then an hour round trip early in the morning to get me home in time for work. It's a lot easier for him to visit me in the city. I am using boomer as a joke or a figure of speech to say acting out of touch and entitled to tell other people what to do. It is a common figure of speech to say, okay, boomer, to someone who is acting entitled regardless of their actual age. It's more of a mindset thing. I googled his property records for his house and he owns it with a woman who shares his last name. Holy shit. I don't know if she's his wife or ex-wife or what, but I'm out of here. I'm honestly freaking out right now, but I just gotta say, great big thank you to everyone who noticed red flags and made me question that. I've blocked his number. He can have fun figuring out where I went.